All right. So let me begin. I am going to lay a foundation based on what many of us already would know or would have been introduced to. And I want you to bear with me through that process, but I want to lay it because we just celebrated Discovery Day, or we acknowledged it, and I want to do a recap on it to show you the significance of it. And also we had just entered the second 40-year period of Bahamian independence. So we enter into this new era, a new generation where we need to identify and experience some change that would take us to the next level. And this, I don't want to say this is a sad thing, but during the next 40 years, most of the founding fathers and mothers and those who were there, leaders at that time, at the time of our independence, will not be around. And so it means there's a new generation that's coming on and to take the helm. But they need to have a vision and a purpose that reaches up and beyond those things that normally bring oppression, injustice, and turmoil. And our founding fathers and mothers need to be comforted in knowing that there is a vision that our new generation can reach out, lay hold of, and take our country further. See, I have this manual here. I'm not going to read all of this, so don't be discouraged. All right, a lot of it is just some notes that I have. Profound events have taken place within the Bahama chain of islands that have changed the course of world destiny since the dawning of modern Americas. The culmination of the eastward track of ancient civilization out of Asia, the first landfall of the Italian navigator Christopher Columbus in the Americas, and the birthing of the modern Americas are just a few examples of world-changing events that have taken place in and around the pristine waters of the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos Islands. It's also interesting to note that the Bahamas celebrated its 40th independence anniversary in 2013. By the time the Bahamas celebrates its next 40 years of independence, it is highly likely that all of the political and community leaders who would have shaped the mindsets of the people of the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos Islands around the time of the Bahamas' first independence would have passed on. The year 2014 therefore marks the threshold of a new era for the people of these islands and presents an opportune time for us to revisit the past to discover a destiny of hope in the midst of a world of expanding chaos. My talk this evening is therefore aimed at taking you on a voyage of rediscovery that deciphers the deeper meanings of world-changing events that led to the so-called discovery of the Bahama chain of islands and the subsequent unfolding of the modern nations of the Americas. In so doing, I intend to uncover an identity, a purpose, and a destiny for us as modern-day inheritors of these islands and for the people who visit our shores. Sadly, however, these islands were stripped of their original inhabitants, the Lucayans, who came to this peace-filled paradise presumably in search of a better life. The Lucayans were captured and carried away by European colonizers to work as slaves in the gold mines of the northern Caribbean islands. Within a generation of European arrival to the Americas in 1492, the Lucayans became extinct. As the first indigenous people of the modern Americas to suffer genocide, an inherent responsibility was bestowed upon us as inheritors of these islands to do our part to make the world a more peaceful place. As a proud member of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, which has as its motto, guard our heritage, my talk this evening is also directed at leveraging our unique heritage to foster peace, security, and environmental integrity, and caring for each other throughout our islands and the world around us. I noticed something interesting the other day. Statements made. We live in a volatile world, according to an article in the New York Times entitled Order versus Disorder by op-ed columnist Thomas Friedman. This was in August. And he stated, the United States is swamped by refugee children from collapsing Central American countries. Efforts to contain the major Ebola outbreak in West Africa are straining governments there. Jihadists have carved out a bloodthirsty caliphate inside Iraq and Syria. After having already eaten Crimea, Russia keeps taking more bites out of Ukraine. And the UN's refugee agency just announced that the number of refugees, asylum seekers, and internally displaced people worldwide has, for the first time in the post-World War II era, exceeded 50 million people. If it feels as though the world of disorder is expanding against the world of order, it is not your imagination. And the Bahamas is not exempted. Central to the traumatic, world-changing events that took place in the Western Hemisphere are the translucent waters that surround these islands as a result of their geographical setting. The waters that surround the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos Islands were the principal conduit for the unfolding saga of the modern Americas and the permanent reuniting of world civilizations. To this end, I believe we can make world history this evening by lending our support to the idea. Here's where we're going to make world history. All right? You're part of it. Where's the photographer? We want to make sure we get all the pictures, faces, and we'll put this in the museum here. A unique occasion for you, Mrs. Major. All right. As I mentioned, I believe we can make world history this evening by lending our support to the idea of giving our waters a name that would embody the history, heritage, and legacy of the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos Islands. A name that would also serve as a lasting tribute to the life and legacy of the indigenous people of these islands who are now extinct. A name that would always remind us of the inherent responsibility that was bestowed upon us as successors and inheritors of these islands, to do our part to make the world a more place. And just for those who may not have seen the topic or read, the topic for this evening is the Lucayan Sea, birthplace of the modern Americas, a tribute to the life and legacy of the indigenous people of the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos Islands. All right, so you want to be part of history tonight? We'll make it happen. All right. Every year, some 6 million visitors make their way throughout the more than 700 islands and keys of the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos Islands in their quest for paradise. Approximately half of all visitors stay in hotels while the remainder visit these islands aboard cruise ships. Upon arrival, visitors to these shores blissfully explore their natural wonders while enjoying a myriad of waterborne activities in a world of peace and rest. Unknown to many, the tropical islands of the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos Islands have a profound story to tell. Coincidentally, the Bahama chain appears to have been aptly furnished by nature to tell this intriguing story. In the midst of this tropical chain of islands near the western border of North Atlantic Ocean is the tongue of the ocean. Equal in depth to the Grand Canyon of Arizona, this deep underwater trench with its tongue-like shape bore witness to the unfolding of the unique history and rare heritage of the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos Islands. The tongue of the ocean now bears testimony to the plight and legacy of the indigenous Lucayans who once lived among these shores and whose stories dates back to the ancient times of Africa, Europe, and Asia. Interestingly, the Bahamas has been listed in the Guinness Book of World Records for having the world's longest-serving newspaper editor in the person of Sir Etienne de Puch, now deceased, of the Nassau Tribune. This record-setting coincidence gives the impression that the Lucayan story was meant to last. Though small in size, these islands possess a profound history that matches the depth of their surrounding seas. Despite their idyllic nature, the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos Islands have seen more than their fair share of turbulence over the centuries. Yet, through a series of unintended historic events, these tiny islands have reshaped the destiny of the Americas and the world. The Bahamas and Turks and Caicos Islands are both a part of the Bahama chain of islands, also known as the Lucayan Archipelago. The Bahama Island chain lies near the western boundary of the Atlantic Ocean. The chain of islands is located just east of South Florida on the southeast coast of the United States of America. The islands extend over 500 miles in a southeasterly direction to within 15 miles of the northern coast of the Republic of Cuba and within 90 miles of the northern coast of the island of Hispaniola, the Republic of Haiti, and Dominican Republic. Today, the Bahama chain is divided into two groups of islands, the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos Islands. The Bahamas comprises the much larger group that runs the full length of the chain in a northwestern to southeastern direction. The remaining group of islands, the Turks and Caicos Islands, is located at the southeastern end of the Bahama chain. The Bahamas occupies more than 90% of the chain's landmass with 5,340 square miles of land. The Turks and Caicos Islands combined landmass is up to 366 square miles. What's in a name? From as early as the 1500s, the Spanish referred to the islands of the Bahama chain as Las Islas de los Lucayos. This name was also used by the Dominican friar Bartolomé de las Casas in his book La Historia de las Indias. Las Casas was a historian and a theologian from Spain who personally observed the horrific treatment of the native Taínos of Hispaniola and Cuba during the early years of Spanish colonization of the Americas. As a result of his unyielding efforts to protect the Taíno people, Las Casas became known as the defender of the Indians. The name Lucayan is the English form of the Spanish name Lucayos. Some scholars suggest that the name Lucayos originated from the Taíno words Luku Kairi or the Arawakan words Lukuno Kairi. The name is said to mean island people. From as early as 1523, the name Bahama was used on a map that was published in Turin, Italy in reference to Grand Bahama. The name Bahama, according to some scholars, was the original name the Lucayans gave the island. This name is purported to mean large upper middle land. Research by Julian Granbury and Gary Vesilius, now deceased, suggests that the modern day name from the Lucayan word suggests that the modern day name came from the Lucayan word Bahama. In 1670, the name Bahama Islands, or the islands of the Lucayos, was used in reference to all the islands of the Bahama chain, as indicated in a royal grant to the Lords Proprietors at the time. Some historians suggest that the name Bahamas was derived from the Spanish word Bahama, that's B-A-J-A-M-A-R, which actually means shallow sea or low tide. Coincidentally, Bahama is the name of the largest single-phase resort development in the history of the Caribbean and the only one of its type in the Western Hemisphere currently under construction. The Taínos and Caribs. The Lucayans, Taínos, and Caribs were the predominant people within the Caribbean region when Columbus arrived at the dawning of the modern era. And just a note here on the dawning of the modern era. Historians, scholars suggest that the year 1500 was the beginning, or thereabout was the beginning of what we call the modern era of human history. We're probably nearing the end part of it, but around 1500 was the modern era where it began. The Lucayans were part of the Arawakan language family and were descended from the Taínos of Hispaniola and Cuba. Consequently, some scholars refer to the indigenous people of the Bahama chain as Lucayan Taíno, while others refer to them as Lucayans. The name Arawak was first used by American ethnologist Daniel Britton in 1871, after realizing that the Taíno language was part of the Arawakan language group. Christopher Columbus called the Taínos Indios, believing that he was in the East Indies. Archaeological evidence suggests that the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos Islands were settled by Taínos sometime between 600 and 800 AD. It's also believed that the Taínos from Cuba may have initially settled islands in the central Bahamas, such as Long Island, while those from Hispaniola may have been primarily responsible for settling the southeastern islands of the Bahama chain, that is, Inagua and Turks and Caicos Islands. From these islands, the native Lucayans eventually went on to settle many of the remaining islands throughout the Bahama chain. After hundreds of years of physical separation from their Taino ancestors in the northern Caribbean, native Taino settlers of the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos Islands eventually developed a distinct culture in the Bahama chain where they became known as Lucayans.